CFAX 1070.
So sometimes we're reminded that on the east coast of Canada, where there's also a lot of ferries, there's a lot more federal money to help fund those systems than you find here on the BC side. And is that something that needs to be addressed? That's what my next guest is talking about. Gord Johns is a member of parliament for Courtenay-Alberni. He's with the NDP, and he's joining us right now with ferry funding on the mind. Sir, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, and hello to everyone back home on the coast.
Yeah, great to talk to you about this because we've been hearing about this for years, it seems like, but right now this is in the news. I think there's a petition being organized by an Nanaimo resident on this. So let's get into this issue. And maybe we should start with just explaining why there's a discrepancy between the East Coast and us here when it comes to federal funding for ferries.
Well, that's a good question. That's the question we're asking.
Yeah.
Is that this is outdated. It's based on constitutional agreements dating back 80 to 150 plus years ago, and the BC Ferries, BC government and federal government agreement that dates back over 50 years, since 1977. These are agreements that were actually the agreement we had with Canada from 1977 wasn't a fair agreement, and that agreement is clearly outdated. The population of Vancouver Island has doubled. The coast has skyrocketed in terms of population, and the ferry users has exploded. So, right now the agreement is that we get far less per passenger and far less per capita than the East Coast, and it's based on the fact that the ferries on the East Coast, the reason they were initially given extra funding is because of their connecting provinces. But that argument doesn't hold water in today's modern era. I mean, Vancouver Island's got the same population as Nova Scotia, pretty much, more than New Brunswick, more than Newfoundland and PEI combined, and we're constantly being ignored on many different issues, but certainly the ferry issues comes to mind, and it's an urgent issue because we know that BC Ferries is currently looking at their performance review coming up this fall, and they're citing that we could see a further increase of rates of 30%, which would have a huge impact on our economy and on the way of life and, on coastal residents.
So this petition I mentioned that's kind of getting some steam, it had some numbers included, and I'll get you to react to this in just a second, but it says that according to the Library of Parliament and some numbers that they provided, BC Ferries received approximately $1.63 in federal operational support per passenger. So that's kind of the per person amount, $1.63. Compared to about $291 for the same metric for the East Coast ferry systems. That's not just like a small discrepancy. That's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. And when you look at Marine Atlantic, it's actually even worse. I mean, they get, over $500, per passenger. And it's about 300-fold, that they're getting in terms of subsidy. We don't think that we should be taking away funds from Marine Atlantic or Atlantic Ferry Services. Absolutely, we believe that the federal government should be supporting them. What we want is fairness and equality. On the East Coast, it's absolutely essential, ferries, for connecting communities and connecting provinces and communities to the rest of Canada. But so is it for Vancouver Islanders, people in Haida Gwaii, North Central Coast, Sunshine Coast, and people in the Lower Mainland that come to the island and back, and the Gulf Islands, of course. So, we know this firsthand. Hey, I remember being a kid, and it was less than $20 for, our family to go to the mainland and back. And we used to go over, frequently. For every holiday, we went over and visited family. Well, I was talking to my mom the other day, who lives in Victoria, and she says it's been over a decade since she's gone to the Lower Mainland. So, this is kind of the barrier that we're seeing for people on the island and in our coastal communities. And again, this subsidy is unfair. And when we look at the per capita basis, again, it's terrible. Per capita, we're getting about $6 to $7. They're getting $125 per capita. So, this is about equality and fairness, and that's all we're asking for. And a formula that is outdated that gets modernized, and we're not going to let up.
People weighing in on this issue. Texter at 71010 says, learning of the ferry subsidy discrepancy is mind-blowing. Add on that BC Ferries doesn't have a frequent traveler program from Vancouver Island to the mainland, and it's no wonder we're feeling it in the wallet. We're talking about this with Gord Johns, NDP Member of Parliament for Courtenay-Alberni. Thanks so much for holding on the line and talking to us today.
Yeah, no worries. This is a really important issue to all of us. I mean, this is we significant timing with the PT7 process and the review that's coming up, and future fare pressures and service challenges will be central to that review, obviously. And so, renewed federal provincial funding and a new agreement, a modernized agreement, is absolutely critical. It's not sustainable for British Columbia to continue carrying such a disproportionate share of the burden for infrastructure that serves our essential transportation needs. I mean, we don't have a choice as coastal communities on how we're going to commute back and forth to connect us to Canada and North America.
So what's happening in Parliament? We kind of mentioned there is a petition in Nanaimo, started by a Nanaimo fellow who's trying to get some awareness of this. What's going on in the House of Commons when it comes to this issue, as far as what you're trying to raise?
Yeah, so first we developed this petition together with Cameron Leckenby, former BC Ferry worker, who's a long time been an advocate and concerned about the cost of ferries and certainly the unfair playing field for the federal and provincial contributions on this. And so we've got an e-petition running, I think 7474. People can just Google federal ferry funding e-petition and they can get on board. We need them to sign it. We need to send a strong message to Ottawa. I created a written petition on the same language as the e-petition, literally went around my riding last weekend, and I had not a single person not wanting or willing to sign the petition. So collecting written petition signatures, that I only need 25 signatures. I can rise in the House. I already have. I've already got one certified, been up in question period. Did a late show last week where I dragged the government in late at night. I'm dragging them in tonight, likely going to be around midnight because we're doing late night sittings. But I'm going to come back and force them to debate this issue again. And I've written a letter to Gregor Robertson, the Federal Minister of Infrastructure. And, we're using every tool and every lever we've got to put pressure on the government to modernize this agreement so that we get federal ferry funding fairness for coastal people.
Is it as simple as just saying, hey, just, what you've done in the East Coast, do it to us? As far as, the amount, is it as easy as that?
I do believe it is because, Mark Carney proved that last year. July 25th, he announced that he was going to decrease ferry costs for Marine Atlantic by 50%. And August 1st, that commitment came into play. So it took him 6 days to implement a significant contribution to ferry users on the East Coast. He could do the same on the West Coast. And, I mean, they continually, use every argument they can to say that they're contributors. Well, they're contributing 3% to the overall cost of running BC ferries. On the East Coast, it's 43%. The provincial government here in BC is contributing 24%. So, I mean, the unequal share is real. And when we look at, some of their responses, they say, well, we supported you through COVID, but so did they with all of the Atlantic ferries to the same amount. When you look at per employee and overall supports, they contribute hundreds of millions of dollars. Then they go and they say, well, we're giving you a loan through the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Well, loans welcome, but it's not a subsidy. It has to be repaid by ferry users. And when you look at the loan, the financing agreement that'll save, in terms of interest costs over 25 years, that equates to about $26 million annually in avoided interest costs. But by comparison, when you look at East Coast ferry systems, they receive hundreds of millions of dollars annually